fast-moving developments, but we want to begin with Sarah Murray. She's live outside of Trump Tower. Good morning.
Good morning, Carol. Well, Donald Trump's fraught relationship with the U.S. intelligence community grew apparently even more strained over the weekend. It began in part with John Brennan saying that Donald Trump's attacks on intelligence were not particularly helpful. Listen to what he had to say.
There is no basis for Mr. Trump to point fingers at the intelligence community for leaking information that was already available publicly. He is going to be, in a few days' time, the most powerful person in the world in terms of sitting on top of the United States government. And I think he has to recognize that his words do have impact. And they can have a very positive impact, or they can be undercutting of our national security.
And, of course, it should be no surprise to people who have tracked Donald Trump for the last year or so that he did not take that criticism very well. He lashed back on Twitter, even suggesting of Brennan, was this the leaker of fake news? Now, of course, all of this is coming against the backdrop of a number of other spats Donald Trump is engaging in with high-profile figures, including civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis. This is all coming just ahead of today, Martin Luther King Day, where we expected Donald Trump to be spending the day in D.C. He's actually going to be scrapping those plans and spending it in New York instead. But he did take to Twitter to talk about celebrating Martin Luther King Day, saying, "Celebrate Martin Luther King Day," and all of the wonderful things that he stood for, honor him for being the great man that he was. Carol.
All right, Sarah Murray reporting live from Trump Tower. And like I said, very soon the Congressman John Lewis will be speaking for the first time since the president-elect tweeted about him over the weekend, maligning his district and saying the congressman should be paying more attention to making his district in the city of Atlanta better. This is the MLK breakfast. It's a scholarship breakfast in Miami. It's a breakfast to honor boys who have made good and to award them with scholarships so they can get ahead. So we're awaiting Congressman John Lewis. We're awaiting him to speak at any moment. And when he does, of course, we'll bring you back live to Miami. But let's talk about this snafu right now. Julian Zalazar is here. He's a historian professor at Princeton University and author of The Fierce Urgency of Now. Ron Brownstein also joins me, CNN senior political analyst and senior editor for The Atlantic. Okay, so let's talk about this snafu. Ron, we know that Donald Trump is a counterpuncher, and if someone maligns him in any way, he's going to strike back. So shouldn't Americans just, and lawmakers, by the way, get used to that?
Well, look, I mean, this is something, when you're president of the United States, every day somebody is unhappy about something you do, whether at home or abroad. I mean, it goes with the territory. And if the president is going to engage in basically combat with everyone who ever disagrees with him at home and abroad, you are in for just an unprecedented rocky ride. And, you know, your list at the beginning of all the different ways that Donald Trump has kind of been engaged in confrontations just over this weekend. The idea that there's going to be anything different in the presidency than there was in the campaign and there has been in the transition seems to me increasingly implausible. And this is the world. I think it does have consequences. I think it does have consequences both at home and abroad in terms of the ability of institutions to function. But it is the world we are heading into.
But Julian, don't the things that John Lewis said also have consequences? Because he questioned the legitimacy of a democratically elected president.
Well, of course. I think there are many Democrats even who, while they share some of the concerns of Congressman Lewis, weren't pleased or comfortable with his words. But I think of the two, it's pretty clear that President-elect Trump has been much looser with his words on a number of issues, from race to intelligence to foreign policy, than Congressman Lewis, who's been very consistent and careful through much of his career, fighting for a certain set of issues. Congressman Lewis was reacting to the stories about the intelligence, about the problems with the election, and I think that's the context where it came from.
So here's where we are in light of this, I guess, argument. A couple of dozen Democratic lawmakers will not attend Trump's inauguration, although Hillary Clinton and her husband will attend, Ron. So I don't know. Senator Marco Rubio, he's at this scholarship breakfast. He was asked about this argument between Donald Trump and Congressman Lewis, and I'll let our viewers hear what Marco Rubio had to say. Here it is.
I have tremendous admiration for Congressman Lewis, not only for what he's done, but what he stands for, and that remains undiminished. I don't agree with him that President-elect Trump is illegitimate. I believe this was a legitimate election, that he was elected through that electoral process. That said, I also had hoped that the President-elect would have responded differently, given everything that John Lewis means to our country. But people make their own decisions.
So, Ron, what do you make of that?
I think you got it exactly right. I mean, I think, the language that John Lewis, as Julian said, was overboard. It's understandable to some extent where he comes from with Donald Trump, basically emerging as a national figure trying to delegitimize President Obama through the birther argument. But it is too far to say that it was an illegitimate election. I think it is reflective, though, of both the clouds hanging over Trump because of this unprecedented accusations about Russian interference, but even more broadly, the level of resistance. I mean, the fact is that he will take the oath of office on Friday, facing a more divided country, I think, than any newly elected president, maybe since Abraham Lincoln. I mean, the fact is that we've never had a president take office with less than majority job approval in their first post-inaugural poll, and it is almost certain that he will become the first. That you will not have a majority of Americans saying they approve of the way he is handling the presidency once he takes office. We've already seen that in the transition with numbers that are much lower. And I think the comments from Representative Lewis just reflects how deep the anxiety and apprehension is in the portions of America that did not vote for him, even as there's undeniable excitement among those who did support him.
It is possible that Donald Trump possibly thinks he went a step too far by maligning Congressman Lewis, because he tweeted out this morning, as Sarah Murray reported, about Martin Luther King Day. He tweeted, "Celebrate Martin Luther King Day and all of the many wonderful things he stood for. Honor him for being the great man that he was." Julian?
It's going to take much more than that, I think, to convince many supporters of civil rights that this is serious. This comes out of a whole campaign where there's been a lot of animosity and tension between Donald Trump and the cause of civil rights, whether you're talking about immigrants or you're talking about African Americans. So John Lewis and the remarks about him tapped right into this. And so I think the tweet today, it's fine, but I don't think it's going to calm many fears about where this administration is heading. They look at Jeff Sessions, and that's where they see the trajectory of the administration, not this tweet.
So, I don't know, it just makes you wonder about what Inauguration Day will be like, Ron.
Well, I think we are already in uncharted waters. We've never had the kind of protest that we had after the election. We've never had the kind of counter-protest, I believe, that is scheduled for the day after the inaugural. And on the other side of the ledger, there are a lot of voters who felt that they were not being heard by the political system, who are very excited about Donald Trump being elected. I mean, the fact is Hillary Clinton won 88 of the 100 largest counties in America. She only won 400 others. I mean, Donald Trump won, 2,600 counties, including many that had voted for President Obama.